Hello, I'm Dr. Manuel G. Saldivar. I'm a cognitive psychologist and a university faculty member. On this channel, I focus on ideas and concepts that will help you become more successful as a college student. Please join me for today's episode. After completing a bachelor's degree, many students choose to continue their educations at the graduate level. Here in the United States, we use the term graduate school to mean any degree that's earned after a bachelor's degree. For the purposes of our discussion today, I'm going to speak in general terms about graduate school, but just be aware that even though I'm using the term graduate school just to be concise, most of the points that I'm going to raise today will apply to any kind of education that you can pursue after earning your bachelor's degree: law school, medical school, nursing school, and so forth. And as I go through the episode today, I will make some comments about some of those specialized programs as appropriate. Now, for this discussion, I'm going to begin at the bachelor's level. This is typically thought of as a 4-year degree, although, in point of fact, in the last 10 or 15 years, it's become quite common for many students to need 4.5, 5, or even 5 or 6 years to complete their bachelor's degree. There's nothing wrong with that. Many students do that not because they're bad students or don't care about school, but because they have competing demands on their time, such as family commitments or a need to work to help support themselves, support their families economically. So many students need more than 4 years to graduate with a bachelor's degree. Now, there are college degrees that exist below the level of bachelor's degrees, meaning they take less time. There are some 1-year programs that are offered by many trade schools, community colleges, and also many community colleges and technical institutes offer associate's degrees, which typically take about 2 years to complete. Those are perfectly fine degrees. I'm not going to discuss them, not because they don't have value, but because they don't necessarily feed directly into graduate school. For our purposes, I'm going to assume you're beginning your trajectory to graduate school or medical school, law school, etc., from the bachelor's level. So after completing a bachelor's degree, the next level up is a master's or professional degree. These terms are often used interchangeably depending on the specific field. For example, degrees in business and law are often called professional degrees because most people that want to work in those fields at a higher level will earn, say, a master's of business administration, an MBA, or if you want to be an attorney, you would earn a JD degree, which is called a Juris Doctorate. I know the doctorate is a little bit misleading. There are historical reasons why the United States uses that term to refer to the degree that's earned by attorneys. But the point is that is the next level of degree up from the bachelor's level. And then the highest level of degree that's available in the United States is a doctorate, sometimes referred to as a PhD in some fields. Other fields use other abbreviations to refer to the doctorates that are awarded for their particular field or discipline. As I've said, the bachelor's degree typically takes 4 to 6 years on average. A master's degree can take 1 to 3 years. It depends on how many course credits you need. There are some master's degrees that require as few as about 36 or so credit hours. Those can be completed in about a year if you are going to school full time. There are other degrees that require more than 50 credits. It just depends on the discipline and the particular program. So you want to be very careful if you are looking at master's degrees or professional programs. Again, I'm referring to things like nursing degrees or law degrees. Be sure that you're familiar with the requirements of a particular school, because you may have had a friend, for example, who went to school X and their master's or professional degree program might have taken a certain amount of time. Don't assume that that amount of time or that time commitment would be the same at school Y or school Z, because that may not be the case. Finally, the doctoral degree is usually about a 4-year commitment, if not more. It depends, again, on the particular program as well as the student's time commitment. There are some doctoral degree level students who attend full time. There are others who attend part time and are still able to earn their doctorates. They just take more time because they might be raising their family or working full time or both while attending their doctoral studies. The takeaway from this whole discussion here is just to point out that the time commitment, especially if you want to go for the highest level degree for a doctorate, can be easily at least 8 to 10 years. I will note too, before moving on, I show these 3 degrees. In reality, it is possible in many cases to go from a bachelor's program to a doctoral program without having to pick up a master's degree in between. Again, that is going to depend on the particular doctoral program you're trying to get into. Some of them will require that you have a master's degree. Some of them will give you the opportunity to earn a master's degree while you are also working on your doctorate degree. Other programs, like medical school, for example, you are able just to go from a bachelor's program into the doctoral program. In this example, a doctorate in medicine, MD, medical doctorate degree, without any particular requirement that you have to have a master's degree. Now, another important point to think about as you are preparing yourself to consider to look at graduate school is that your major, your specialization in graduate school, does not necessarily guarantee or lock you into a particular career. As an aside, I wanted to point out that there are lots of statistics, here's just one example, that most people that graduate from college, whatever their degree level is, do not end up working in a field directly related to their degree. In some cases, this is by choice. Some people might earn a degree in a particular topic or subject because it interests them, because they just want to learn more about that subject. They don't necessarily see it as something that's central to their career. In other cases, there are people who simply are not able to find work in a particular field. Maybe it's a field that doesn't have a lot of job opportunities or job openings that are available at any given time. Maybe the individual's program was not able to prepare them, or the individual themselves didn't make some decisions or make choices that would put them in a good position to be able to find work in a particular field based on their degree. So your exact circumstances, of course, are going to vary based on your own situation, but I did want to just highlight the fact that there is more than one pathway in many cases to a particular career. And in order to make sure that you are on track and that you have a realistic, solid plan, you want to make sure that you're consulting with a career advisor and ideally also with professionals in the field in order to make sure that you understand your options. If you want to be a medical doctor, I would strongly encourage you, before looking at medical school, try and find some medical doctors you can talk to get their advice, talk about their experiences. If you want to be an attorney, try and find attorneys to talk to who can share their experiences with you, maybe give you some advice about the best pathway to follow. Same for nursing, same for engineering, or whatever field you want to enter. Now, I am a psychologist by training, so I'm going to use psychology as an example of this concept of multiple pathways. If you're not interested in psychology, certainly I'm not trying to brainwash you to switch to psychology. I'm just using this example because it is one area where I happen to have a good amount of knowledge. Sorry for the interruption, but if you're enjoying this video, please like, subscribe, and click on the bell icon for notifications. Now, this diagram shows the overlap between 3 professions, 3 career paths that have a strong relationship but are not interchangeable. They're not the same thing. Although a lot of times, especially new college students, new bachelor's degree students, often come in and don't quite have this understanding. So I am a psychologist, as I said. In every state in the United States, to my knowledge, you cannot legally call yourself a psychologist if you don't have a doctoral degree. In psychology, that usually boils down to PhD, which is an abbreviation for a Latin phrase that just means someone with a doctorate level degree, or PsyD. PsyD is a relatively new kind of doctorate degree that was originated in California about 35 years ago, and that is a pathway specifically for people that want to be clinical psychologists. Now, I'm a research psychologist, so I don't treat patients, I don't work with individuals who have mental health or behavioral problems. I do more fundamental research, and then the kind of research that I do can be taken in turn by people that are clinical psychologists, people that are working directly with patients. The point here is that if your goal, and that's the example I'm going to provide here just to illustrate this idea of multiple paths to the same kind of work, If your goal, let's say, was to work with individuals who have mental health problems, who have emotional problems, who have problems in their marriage, with their children, other family issues, then you might be interested in a career as a clinical psychologist. That's one pathway, but you would have to earn a doctorate, as I say, in order to be able to become a licensed clinical psychologist, someone who can work with patients in a therapeutic setting. However, you might also consider becoming a therapist. This is a different term, but it still allows you to enter a profession where you're able to provide therapeutic services, hence the name, to, again, people that have a particular challenge. Therapists specialize in one or more areas, but again, they can be anything from family therapy, adolescent or pre-adolescent therapy, sometimes so-called child psychologist, although that's kind of a misnomer. Drug or addiction therapists. There are all kinds of therapists that work with individuals that have all kinds of different challenges. In some cases, you can become a therapist by earning a doctorate, but in other cases, there are some master's degree programs, such as master's degrees in social work, master's degrees in education, with a specialization in counseling, or Masters of Science degrees that might be in clinical psychology or even other fields. Point is, with these master's degrees, you could still earn enough college credit and be able to get experiences that would allow you to sit for a licensing exam in your particular state to become licensed as, let's say, a family therapist. And then finally, there are counselors. And again, this is a different term, and it is a different job or different profession, but again, it relates to this idea of working with people, helping people who have particular challenges in terms of mental health, behavioral issues, or other things. Here, again, you can earn a master's degree in a particular subject that will let you not only specialize in a certain area, like let's say family therapy, child therapy, but also be able to sit for a licensing exam to become a licensed counselor. In some states, I live in Texas, and this is one of the few states where actually you can become a counselor, not a therapist, that would not be your title, not a psychologist, that would not be your title, but you could become someone with the title of counselor with a bachelor's degree, specifically in addiction studies. So these individuals are able to get licensed as what are called addiction counselors. So they work with individuals who have addiction problems, with a bachelor's degree being the minimum requirement. Of course, people can choose to go further and get additional degrees, but the point is you can become a counselor in Texas, in this example. You can become someone who works with people who, in this example, have addiction challenges with just a bachelor's degree. So again, the takeaway point to all this is don't assume because you have a neighbor's kid's friend's hairdresser's girlfriend who has followed a particular career path that you're interested in, that you have to follow that exact path in order to do certain work or get a particular kind of job. In many cases, you can find different pathways that will get you to the same kind of work. The point is to be aware that these possibilities exist, and you can get better information, more precise information, as I said earlier, by speaking to a career advisor or professionals in the field that you want to enter. Next, I want to turn briefly to the concept of paying for graduate school. One of the big challenges with graduate school is that it is almost always much more expensive than paying for a bachelor's degree program for multiple reasons I won't go into here. Before I start discussing the most common sources of funding for graduate students, and again here I'm including law students, medical students, nursing, and so forth, I do want to point out that Pell Grants, which are a very common way for bachelor's degree students to pay for their educations, Pell Grants are not available at the graduate level, at least not as of today. I'm making this video in 2022, although I doubt that this would change anytime soon. The reasons for this are ultimately political. I'm not going to get into that, but just be aware that Pell Grants, unfortunately, are not available for graduate study. Now, at the graduate level, again, whether we're talking graduate school, medical school, law school, whatever program you may end up in, scholarships are not called scholarships. They're called fellowships if you're a graduate student. So fellowships certainly are one possibility. Just like with scholarships, fellowships can be for one semester, for 1 year, for multiple years. In some cases, you can earn a fellowship through an application process or an award process with your college or university. In other cases, fellowships are awarded by foundations or companies or other sorts of entities that are from outside your college or university. Again, you can get good information about fellowships by talking to a particular graduate program that you're interested in applying to, as well as with the financial aid office at your college or university. If you are a graduate student, you might be able to qualify for what's called tuition remission. This means that as a graduate student, the university will not charge you tuition. In reality, this means your department, the program that you are enrolled in as a graduate student, is really paying on your behalf. But from your perspective, from the student's perspective, you basically are not being charged for tuition. Usually, this is going to be in exchange for what's called an assistantship. An assistantship means that as a graduate student, you are taking graduate classes, of course, but you're also working for the university part-time in some capacity. You could work as a teaching assistant or TA. You could work as what's called a research assistant or graduate research assistant, GRA. In some cases, you might even have an opportunity to teach bachelor's degree classes, even as you're working on your own master's or doctorate degree. I did this when I was a PhD student. It was a great experience, gave me a lot of opportunities to begin learning how to become an educator. So these assistantships represent a great opportunity to help you pay for graduate school. Of course, you have to qualify for them. Every university, every college will have different stipulations you have to meet in order to be able to become a research assistant or a teaching assistant or what have you. Also, of course, funding has to be available from your department or your university. Another option for graduate students, one that actually most graduate students end up looking to at some point, are student loans. These work pretty much the same way as they do at the bachelor's degree level. Some loans are available from the U.S. federal government. Those typically have much better terms. Obviously, you have to pay them back because they are loans, but usually you have better financial terms. They're, relatively speaking, more inexpensive than private loans, but private loans are also available. And then finally, especially if you are a more advanced graduate student, meaning you're closer to the end of your program, and if you are a master's or doctoral student, if you're finishing up your independent research project, which will result in writing your master's thesis or your doctoral dissertation, which are the big research projects that you write at the end of your time as a graduate student in order to complete your degree, it is possible to find financial support in the form of research grants. You would get funding from somewhere. It could be a research foundation, it could be a company, it could be some other entity that will pay you, or strictly speaking, pay your university a certain amount of money in order for you to perform a certain research project. That money technically doesn't go into your pocket, it goes to your university, but your university can use it to provide you with a fellowship, to provide you with a paycheck in the form of an assistantship. The money can be used to help fund the costs associated with the research project, materials, supplies, travel. Also be aware if you're in a program that does not have a research component, such as medical school or law school, you're not expected to perform a lot of independent research in those kinds of programs. Typically, you will need to figure out on your own how to pay your own way, and usually that comes down to assistantships and student loans. But again, the exact options available to you in your own situation, you can discuss with the university, the program that you're interested in applying in, and their financial aid office. Finally, before I wrap up, I wanted to touch upon some questions that I would recommend anyone ask of their graduate program when you are looking to apply. When you're gathering information, when you're considering, do I want to go to this school, that school, the other school, here are a few questions that I really encourage you to ask that program so you have this information to help you make a good decision. First, make sure you have an understanding of the expected course load and the time frame to complete the program. For example, if you are going to attend full-time, what is a reasonable amount of time you can expect to be able to graduate? How long does it take for students typically to graduate if they're full-time students? If you plan to attend part-time, how long would that take? How many courses would you have to take if you were a full-time student versus a part-time student? And so forth. These kinds of ideas are important to understand because, as I said at the beginning of this episode, different programs, even if it's the same degree, may look different at different universities. In other words, a master's degree in business at school X versus a master's in business at school Y, they may require different numbers of course credits. They may require different sets of courses. Some of them may actually prohibit students from attending part-time. Some graduate programs will not allow students to be part-time students. They have to go full-time. So you want to have a grip on this kind of basic information to help you make a good decision. Talk to the program, to the university about available funding. I just provided a number of examples of different kinds of funding that graduate students could qualify for. See what is available at your particular university. For example, if you're looking at a master's program, let's say at a university that is smaller, that doesn't have a lot of active research projects, as a university, they're probably not going to have a lot of research funding available even for their faculty, never mind for graduate students. So that example of university, you might not be able to count on even the possibility of research funding for you. So you should know that going in as you are considering different programs. Ask the program about what mentoring or advising opportunities are provided for students. When I was a PhD student, for example, I had a faculty member who was assigned to me as my advisor. So if I ever had any problems or issues, there was one faculty member, one professor that I could go and talk to get advice, to get help, to talk to whenever I just needed someone to talk to. Some programs will not offer a formal kind of relationship between graduate students and faculty advisors. Others will. If this is something that's important to you, or at least you want to have that as one of the variables you're considering as you look at one university versus another, that's an important thing to make clear. Ask graduate programs about previous students' outcomes, especially if you are in a professional program, a law school, medical school, nursing school. Ask the program, for example, how many of your students have received a license in whatever profession the program is aimed at. If you are looking at a master's degree in nursing, for example, if that master's program has a track record of producing students who are not able to pass the nursing licensing exams, that's not a good sign. If you're looking to attend a law school whose graduates do not have a good track record of passing the bar exam in your state, that's not a good sign. So in cases where there is some kind of licensing requirement to enter a certain profession, you want to have that information from the school. In most cases, this will be public. It shouldn't be an issue to get that information. They may not offer it up if it's not positive numbers, but I'm not aware of any state where that information is private, so you should be able to get that kind of information. Even if you are in a field where there isn't necessarily a licensing process or any kind of professional guideposts that you can look at, you still want to get some idea of, if I pursue, let's say, a master's degree in history at your university, what are your prior graduates doing now? What kind of jobs do they tend to take? What sort of outcomes do they tend to have? The answer is going to vary from school to school, from program to program, but if you have that information, again, that's more facts that you can work into your own thought process. And then finally, ask the program, what characteristics would they ascribe to successful students? In other words, if I came to your law school, to your medical school, whatever the program was, if you think back, you would say to the school, if you think back to students who have come before that have been successful, what made them successful? What were their characteristics? And by getting this information, you can get some insights into what it takes to succeed at that particular university or college, that particular program. Because again, different graduate programs can be so different that someone with a certain set of characteristics, with a certain profile, could be very successful and hopefully very happy or at least satisfied in one particular program, but a different program that looks very different, that has different demands it places upon students, that same person who would be very successful, very happy at program A, they might not be happy and not successful at program B. Not because the person has changed or there's something wrong with them, but because the programs are different. So you want to have a grip on what does it take in the school's opinion or in their observation to be successful at that particular program. So to review, in today's episode, we talked about ideas related to preparing for graduate school. I discussed how to define graduate school. What is graduate school? How do we think about it? I made the point that a degree you might earn does not necessarily equal a certain fixed career path, that there are many cases where a particular career, particular kind of profession can be reached by following different pathways, and I used examples from my own field of psychology to illustrate that point. We talked about paying for graduate school, and then finally, I gave you some advice in terms of questions to ask graduate schools or graduate programs to help make sure you have the information you need to make a good choice. I hope you found this information helpful. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll click on the thumbs up icon below. And if you really enjoyed it, please subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications by clicking on the bell icon. YouTube will notify you of future videos added to this channel. Remember, college success is challenging, it takes work and effort, but it is certainly within your grasp. Good luck.